All right, good morning. How's everyone? Okay, this is a wake-up call, all right? It's a wake-up call. We're here at Wild Digital. Shit's gonna get wild. So, all right. So what are we gonna do today in this panel? Okay, it's gonna be a little bit different. We have friends from the ecosystem, and we're asked to talk about Indonesia's tech and investment landscape. But what we're gonna do right now, everyone's talking about Indonesia, everyone's paying attention, all the unicorns coming out of it, money flowing in. To really understand Indonesia's tech and investment landscape, I thought we'd actually go back in time a little bit to talk about the earliest days, kind of like earlier evolution, and talk a bit about how tech investment was like in the past. And how did that lead up to present right now? And then we're going to talk a bit about the forces which is driving the investment landscape into the next 12, 24 months, potentially into the future. So past, present, future. And with that in mind, Shinta, I'd love you to just ramble on all these interesting stories from the earliest days before all these outsiders like us came into your turf. Please take the mic and tell us a bit about what things were like back then.
All right. Thank you, Khailee, and good morning, everybody. Maybe I can give a bit of background of, who I am.
Please do.
Yeah, so I've been a tech entrepreneur for 21 years before any one of you is doing it. So I started my first startup. We don't even call it startup at that time because we don't have that term yet. In '96, which is my company, Bubu.com. We started as a web development company, so we design websites for companies, and I think at that time we just had, there's no Wi-Fi. We had dial-up. And I remember there was no what you call venture capital. There's no angel investors. We just have partners who invest in our business. So it's totally a different landscape, but I'm such a believer of the internet because I remembered, I'm an architect background, so I have nothing to do with technology. But then when I was taking my MBA, I was working at the computer lab, and I actually taught myself how to create a website through the internet. I think that's the reason why, I woke up like, oh my God, this media is super powerful. You can actually taught yourself or learn and educate yourself, creating website, understanding what HTML is, Flash and all that through the internet. And you can actually do that. And that means this is such a powerful media. So, I'm such a believer of that. So I stuck for 21 years. I remember early on, nobody knows what the hell I'm doing. I created a company called Bubu.com. First of all, they go what is Bubu?
It's a 4-letter domain name. That's
exactly.
What it is.
That early on,
Syllables.
You can take any domain you want, basically. So I said, I want to name my dog.
Oh, your dog's name is
yes.
Bubu.
Because it's easy.
A good thing your dog didn't have a 21-letter name.
Because I remember I just need a name where, people, when they ask me what's your company name, I can just spell out bubu.com. So they won't misspell it.
So at that time, did the dot-com crash in the U.S. affect what was going on in Indonesia at the time?
Well, early 2000, I created about 4 to 5 other companies. I created one of the earliest news portal called corridor.com. I created an early entertainment portal called nasgor.com. I created a free email company called mailkita.com, a music portal called musikkita.com. None of them survived.
Oh, I thought you listed each and every one of them for $1 billion each, right? And then they didn't survive.
Well, business is all about timing. I see things too far, and I guess, but then, it's always like being an entrepreneur. You learn from your mistake, and you become a better entrepreneur.
Well, I think the mobile, that was the early kind of phase of the internet, kind of like late 90s. But Indonesia also had a good time with the mobile mid-2000s,
exactly.
ringtones and
yes.
all of that. That's the dawn of the mobile internet.
Yeah.
Was actually all about ringtones at the time.
Actually, we get rich because of that. Yeah, so I did that as well. I actually did a joint venture with a Filipino company called Chica. So we called the company Bubu Chica. And, we created a lot of hype on the quizzes, games, celebrity SMS, and all that. And
at this time, there's still no VCs yet, or did
No.
the VC industry start knocking
not
on your
yet.
door? No, not yet.
And then I went to create one of the early marketplace in Indonesia called Plaza.com. Now it's called Belanja.com. And we brought in eBay to invest to the company. So again, that's too early for us. Everything that I'm doing.
Oh, it sounds like eBay was taking a bet on Indonesia. What year was that? It's
2009.
2009.
Yes.
Ah.
She's so ahead of time. I'm curious what next is coming for her.
Yeah, exactly.
I
Like we got to invest
in
in what she's looking at ahead of time.
Yeah, and then I started one of the earliest tech venture capital as well, which is Nusantara Ventures.
Nusantara, right?
Yes.
Yeah, there.
So yeah, that's when suddenly there's a number of startups. Just a number, like you can literally count by.
It's the dawn of local VC right here, man, with Nusantara. I remember I was Googling around just to know what the Indonesian landscape was like as an entrepreneur. I was trying to raise money back in the 2005,
It was 2010 I created that.
So a bit later. And so I stumbled across Nusantara's website and I read about you. This was before I met you. So this is kind of...
Yeah. So, I think finally we see startups around 2010. That's why we created Nusantara Ventures. And then after that, you see more venture capitals coming in. And then we kind of create the angel investors network. So, I've created an angel investor network.
And this was 2010.
2010 is just the venture capital. I started the angel network just 2015.
2015.
Yes.
Got it. Okay, I'm gonna put a time capsule pause right there at 2010. So, Amit, Adrian, where were you guys in this interest in Southeast Asia, interest in Indonesia, circa early 2010s?
Well, it's interesting because I had also an important lesson in timing because I'm an entrepreneur turned investor, and my first company was in China in 2006. And back then, what we wanted to do is to provide a scalable online English learning company to students in China. But in 2006, if you can remember back to then, you barely had the smartphone. And, so if you fast forward to almost 8 years later, or 3 years after we actually sold our company to a US firm, then you had the rise of Tutor ABC and VIP Kid, which are now billion-dollar companies. And, not to say that we were necessarily the pioneers, but really using a lot of the thinking and the types of technologies that we were creating.
Because at the time, like anything you'd build, the total addressable market is limited by people who had the devices, right? So hence it's not, you can't, even though China would have 1 billion people, it's only limited to people who could use it, right?
Right. But even beyond that, one of our angel investors was this chap called Xu Xiaoping, who had created the biggest English school in China. It's a $4 billion, it listed in 2008 or something in the US, it's worth $4 billion. And even he believed that disruptive power of internet back then when he had seeded us. Anyway, so after that, I came to Indonesia in 2012. And I recall at the time, I'd spent 6 years in China, had really seen that massive wave of mobile internet and e-commerce and so on happen in China. I thought there must be somewhere can deploy or use, leverage that experience and everything that we saw from China in another market. And originally from Southeast Asia is a natural market to come to. Not to mention my wife is Indonesian. But when it came to, first I thought, look, should I base myself out of Singapore, which is where Amit is, and then I came to Jakarta, and I attended, I think what was the very first, actually I don't know if you did a tech conference before 2012, but it was at least the first Tech in Asia conference in Jakarta, and there were probably only a couple of hundred people there. And to me, it felt like the electricity in the air, the atmosphere, just the ideas, everything that was bubbling up here was far more exciting to be, I'm sorry to say, than Singapore. Right? And I'd gone later to another conference in Singapore. And it just so happened, actually, in that conference in Tech in Asia, I'd met Ferry, one of the founders of Traveloka, who back then were trying to build a meta search engine similar to Qunar in China. But seeing after kind of seeing the market and deciding what to do here, then I think I would count myself as one of that first wave of the Rocket Internet people who'd been here. And Rocket Internet, probably the masters of timing, and if you would use the word cloning, right, companies in coming to Indonesia. And I think that's one of their failures as well, because it is so much about pure cloning versus localization of business models.
So they kind of didn't localize or adapt enough. And this, I think the Rocket Internet wave into Indonesia kind of kickstarted the startup scene in some way, right? Injecting foreign talent like yourself and a whole other folks in. This was probably 2012 kind of time frame. All right, so let's pause the time capsule at 2012. Amit, what were you up to in 2012?
You know, in the spirit of being early or being late, I was trying to be perfect. Yeah. No, so my journey is been that I've been an executive for a lot of large tech companies in the region for a long time, operated in these markets, built joint ventures and all those things, and then I turned an entrepreneur, and I a failed entrepreneur. And once I lost my money, my dad's money, my father-in-law's money, cardinal sin. That's when I said, okay,
You're banished from India forever. And
totally. Like, go back to Singapore where you come from. So, the question for me was, either do another startup, because it was for sure I was not going back to the corporate world. I enjoy the thrill, the chaos of building something.
And this was 2012?
No, this is 2008, 2009.
Okay.
So the question was either go and build something again on your own, or how do you get more involved with more startups? Because one of the things I realized was that I actually enjoy more, working with startups than actually building my own startup.
Yep.
And then, what's the next best thing? You think about building your own venture firm, so that you can help more startups, right? So 2008 through 10, I was vice chairman of a large angel group in Singapore. In fact, the largest angel network in that sort of period. 2010 is where we started sort of thinking about building a venture firm. 2012, coincidentally, is the year we started Jungle. And to be honest, not until 2015 did we write a check in Indonesia.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Well, that's interesting though, right? Because I think at this 2012 timeframe, you're here with Rocket, right? And then you've got Nusantara set up locally. You've got Jungle set up out of Singapore. And at this point, I think that you eventually, you created Convergence what year?
So we didn't launch Convergence till the end of 2014.
Okay. So we would say that maybe a lot of active VC investment, I think in the past, although there was interest 5 years ago in 2012 and some talent coming in, angel groups being set up, it wasn't maybe until 2 years ago where you got this large swarm of more foreign capital coming in. Would that be right to say?
Well, I'd say that, sorry, because from the Indonesia context, I think if you look back to the 2010 time period, there was actually some VC here, but the market was too early. And the majority of that capital, I think there was pockets of local capital, but very small. And then there was the Japanese capital. So I think if you look at which market was the first to recognize the future potential in tech for Indonesia, it's Japanese funds.
Yeah. Cyber Agent, I think, was here.
Yeah, IMJ was here as well.
Yeah, IMJ was here. But I think that... I don't know. I think he's completely smoke bomb and disappeared. Ebihara, Takeshi Ebihara.
He was out here, but even before, also East is also a lot of Japanese money with
Wilson
Batara.
Definitely has come in very early in the space, and it's interesting because both Ebihara, Cyber Agent, and East, they function a lot like angels in a way.
Yeah.
They would spend time with the entrepreneurs early on, and then they would have angel-like valuations going into deals, and they were essentially like professional angels, or kind of full-time-ish kind of angels acting at the time.
Yeah, no, I think that's an important distinction to talk about, because I do think that even today we are not yet fully, it's not fully stacked up in terms of the capital ecosystem. And it's always, it builds up over time, right?
Yeah,
so you have all that seed fund, angel networks, incubators, ecosystem kind of really buzzing quite nicely now. You've obviously got venture funds at the next stage, the A's and the B's happening more and more now, and over time it will then, next layer will also jump in. So for us it's interesting. Back, I have been part of the 2000 tech ecosystem in the region as well, and back in the day, if you were building an internet business, if you had Malaysia and Singapore, you had it all.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you built a business on the back of those markets initially as well.
Yeah.
I think today that is said about Indonesia. And Singapore in that sense as well.
It's almost like you can't really build an ASEAN business without having a foothold of Jakarta and Indonesia.
In 2012, I looked at 250 deals in that year. We checked our CRM. In 2016, we looked at 1,950 deals.
Yeah.
250 deals, 80% was coming from Malaysia and Singapore.
Yeah.
1,950 deals, 80% coming from Jakarta and Singapore.
Whoa, okay, I see.
80%.
Yeah.
So I think the tide has shifted.
It's shifted a little bit.
Shifted.
Also, I think like an interesting thing that Amit brought up over here for our audience to observe is that the early waves entrepreneurs kind of making things happen, pulling in partners to build business with them, because angel and VC, these terms weren't even things yet, right? And then you've got more talent coming in, foreign talent, local talent, starting to work in tech companies like Rocket, or building their own companies, starting to hustle, getting things moving. Then the angel groups started to form. Then the super angels, or rather like these early stage VCs, Cyber Agent, IMG, Takeshi Ebihara, and Wilson started coming in. Now, then the professional VCs, or rather later stage Series A-ish kind of checks started popping up maybe about two plus years ago. Now, at this point, like I remember my first visit to Indonesia, I wouldn't have, I think, got the exposure to Indonesia that I have if it wasn't for Shinta. Now, I didn't know what I signed up to when Shinta first invited me for the ID Byte Roadshow. So she was doing a roadshow to look for entrepreneurs across Indonesia. In 2 weeks, I was back to back. I was on like vans. I was on like local planes. We were in Malang, Bandung, Yogyakarta, Surabaya. So my first experience with Indonesia was not Jakarta. It was actually
Intense, huh?
It was intense. And then but the buzz, you could feel it, because you would see like local community organizers, like like in Bandung, like the just local meetups, and they were just programmer meetups, and they were building things. So that kind of buzz, and now it's professionalized. Look at how many people here are dressed in shirts, like actual button shirts and batik like this, and suits and stuff. This is a bit more mature, right? I think this is a little bit more mature. So let's fast forward to today. What is Indonesia's tech and investment landscape like today versus all those early years, just like 2 years ago, right? 2 or 3 years ago. What is it like? How would you describe the feeling of it today?
From our perspective, if I can sort of chip in first, one of the big reasons we waited for a long time before we made an investment in Indonesia was the quality of next level talent. We obviously found very passionate and experienced entrepreneurs, but we struggled from, thank you, we struggled from seeing how they are going to be able to build teams of 10, 20, people that are going to help them scale their businesses. So that's one big shift that I'm seeing, I would say, in the last 12 months, not even 2 years, 12 months, is that the next level management team that I'm meeting is significantly better and impressive, and it makes us, say, what? I think this is making a lot more sense now.
Yeah, more professionals, more pedigrees actually coming into the ecosystem.
So that's one big shift for us. The other big shift is I do think, eventually the business of venture is the business of home runs, is the business of building large businesses. And I do think that the Indonesian entrepreneur today is thinking significantly bigger, is much more savvier on how to work with partners, is much more savvier about, Indonesia may be a test bed, but, I am going to go regional, whether it's the metro model, whether it's the mass market model. I do understand how to do this. And that's made it more and more interesting for entrepreneurs.
Well, there's a lot of new sources of capital coming into the region as well. Like today, as we stand, it's not just a Singaporean money or local money, right? So maybe, Adrian, what have you seen in terms of VC interest?
Well, I think there's this missing middle still in Indonesia and perhaps for the entire region, where companies who have raised the seed, where there's plentiful capital, and then even A, with a number of new firms have started. And now I need to raise the $5 to $10 million. And there aren't really that many venture funds that are focused on this segment to take the companies to the next level, which is very much different. Well, there's jungle. Glad you're here today. Which is very different to how things were in China and in India, where there was plentiful capital coming in every single stage that accelerated the growth of the ecosystem.
So we would say today, as it stands, even though there's a lot of excitement and interest in the Indonesian market, the layers, the stacks, the full chain of the value ecosystem, the 5 to 10 million range, we've got jungle, but great thing, early mover in that sense, right? Ready to deploy that capital. I think like Red Doors, a few deals we did together. Very grateful to have like larger checks come in. But you would say that there's still some gaps in that stack, or?
I'd say there's definitely a gap there. As an ecosystem as a whole, if you think about Southeast whole of Southeast Asia or ASEAN, how many venture firms are there? There's probably not that many dedicated venture firms, especially if you move out some of the CVCs, right? Probably less than 100 at least. In China itself probably has 10,000, right? So relatively speaking, the entire ecosystem is still quite immature, but especially in the later stages of capital, there are definitely gaps. And there are firms that are being formed to fill that, but that's going to be a natural part of the evolution of the ecosystem. Right.
So Shinta, you're really plugged into, of course, like the local ecosystem, the local players, government, corporates, and I guess some people might say they especially on the corporate side, right, all the clients, right, they were always interested, but somehow are they very involved in the local scene as investors, or what's the local involvement today?
For the corporation?
Yeah, how involved is Indonesia in Indonesia today,
Well,
corporate side?
I think the corporate side only started to be interested in startup like only the past 2 years as well. There's telcos who are, building incubators, and then there's also a lot of conglomerates who put in money and also creating incubators. But again, the way I see it, that's why one of the reasons that we created an angel network is because I see there's, the gap, like before the entrepreneur go, talking to VC, they should nurture the company first, and that's why we as angel comes in, and then we want to be able to actually a bit of hand holding, but we as angel, we pick companies that we're passionate about. That's the thing, because I think being an angel is not just about investing the money, but it's actually opening doors, helping them in the management sometimes.
So in a way, as like an angel and also angel network, you're kind of linking it to the corporates as well. That's how you're kind of hand-holding them to come in, guiding them to come in.
Because in our angel network, we have, people like Eric Toh here, for instance. He's into media, he's into sports. So we use that link to find startup that, can actually work with his company or with him personally. So those things are, I think that's really important for any startup, any entrepreneurs.
Now you see this kind of way of looking at today, Indonesia's present tech and investment landscape, we're looking about local and foreign. But for the founders, they'll go where capital is offered to them, right? Indonesian entrepreneurs have raised money from China, from Japan, so it's kind of very global game here. So the foreign investors over here, like I think we've seen a lot of interest from China. I think like ATM, is just doing a little roadshow over here. O1 VC, Ian's kind of down as well. We got folks in the room over here, which I hope are going to cut $5 to $10 million checks, get the checkbook out. But what is your take on foreign presence right now for VC through the stack?
So, Adrian spoke about the capital stack, and I'll share a little bit of experience from India, because in some sense I feel like, of course, we are, we observe the China ecosystem quite well, but I do think that in some sense, we are much closer to the India ecosystem on the capital stack side. I was in Tech in Asia here a few weeks or a month back, and I was at your conference 4 years back or so, and I can see the progression was very similar to how India has gone through. And today, the Tech in Asia conference that I came to looks like what 2007 and 8 in India was like. And one of the big observations I have about India is that eventually the capital stack built out quite differently, in that it didn't get segregated into seed funds, A funds, B funds, C funds, and the lines became quite blurred. If you look at, Credivo, Red Doors, iFlix, all three for us actually were seed investments, which eventually we did the A round then, we did the B round then, and I think more and more you will see firms like mine will start blurring the lines when we start realizing that the entrepreneur wants to spend time with an investor who can support him through multiple rounds and not having to be on this constant fundraising roadshow. So having, even though there is the flight of capital from other markets here and they're writing the $5 to $10 million checks, I do think the local firms, the regional firms, will eventually span across seed to B, and rather than being too much specialized in one particular stage.
Yeah, I think we see a lot of that happening, and I do think that for entrepreneurs, especially at this stage right now, if they need to run around all over the world to shop for capital each and every round, it's pretty tiresome. So definitely the edge is over there. I think for some other entrepreneurs as well, some other companies who have the option of a lot of inbound VC interest, then maybe they're trying to do a bit internal competition and trying to shop a little bit, but but I can definitely see that. So we're running out a bit of time on this panel. So I'm gonna just end it on a little bit of a talk about the future and what we're seeing in the next 1 or 2 years. Individually, what are you guys hoping for? What are you guys interested in? How do you think the tech investment landscape of Indonesia will be evolving in the next 12 to 24 months? What are your final words?
So, we're really excited, obviously, about the potential of this market. I think that capital coming to that missing middle that we referred to is coming. And one of the things that we referred to previously in a separate conference was how the US was to China in terms of helping accelerate their ecosystem. Could well be China to Indonesia, especially with the government's plans like One Belt, One Road and so on. And I think one of the ways that China will be very helpful to an ecosystem like Indonesia is also because they're growing from a similar condition as China was previously. It wasn't growing from somewhere that everything was very well developed. And so I'm really excited about vertical commerce. We've got a lot of horizontal commerce platforms, but there are lots of interesting areas of vertical commerce that can come out. Actually, a lot of interesting areas in fintech, not just in lending, but in payments and improving the overall infrastructure for the unbanked over here. And these are all areas that I think local and foreign venture capitalists can support the local and foreign entrepreneurs here to build out solutions.
Right. In my case, I have this mission to actually help startups in Indonesia to also become world-class company and become, not just player in Indonesia, but they should be outside of Indonesia as well. So at the moment, I'm working with several associations and organizations to create a better ecosystem for the startup. One of it, I'm interested to create a pilot project that concentrate on a certain area, because we have in Indonesia called Kawasan Ekonomi Khusus, or it's the special economic area where people do tax deduction, tax holiday on certain things. So why can't we do the same for startups? We can start with a pilot project on a certain area, and then we do all the good things in there for the investors and the startup as well. So that's what I'm trying to push right now.
Fantastic. We need more of those kind of initiatives, more inclusive ways of building the ecosystem. Amit, next 12 to 24 months, predictions of how you see Indonesia's tech landscape evolving?
No predictions, to be honest. Maybe just a thought that came to my mind. We talk about foreign capital, foreign competition. We are seeing Chinese entrepreneurs come and build businesses here. We are seeing Indian entrepreneurs trying to do things here. I get asked this question a lot by our LPs on our investors, right? On, why do you think a local entrepreneur will win? What kind of businesses would a local entrepreneur win? And, I think it's kind of a little bit dated that we say, hey, listen, we understand the market better than others, and we understand the local language. And I think those barriers to entries are going away with time, and they will go away with time. Technology will become less of a barrier to entry. Capital will become less of a barrier to entry. To be very honest, execution will also become less of a barrier to entry as people are able to hire more people, smart people. I think what will differentiate you over everybody else over time is going to be the amount of proprietary data and proprietary networks that you build. Yeah. The reason iFlix, the reason Grab we think is going to be successful is not because it's a better app and things like that. It's because now I used to be an Uber customer. I've removed them. I've brought on Grab. Because I get American Express, I get KrisFlyer miles for every time I take that cab ride. That's important to me. That's a proprietary network and an instance of a proprietary network. Those are the reasons why a customer will stick with you versus the global player. And that's where you will win over the global competition. And that's where we will win in terms of the local capital versus the global capital. So maybe that's a takeaway for most entrepreneurs.
That's an excellent takeaway for folks in the room who are not entrepreneurs, who are looking at investment landscape. Whether you want to be an angel investor or you already are an angel investor, whether you're thinking of launching a VC firm or expanding its activity here to Indonesia, I really hope today's kind of stories from what the landscape was, how it's evolved, and what we think it will be was useful to all of you. And I dare say that if there's one thing we can take away from the common thread amongst our conversation today is that the rate of evolution of this scene has just picked up so fast. We're talking about long-term, meaning like the next 12 months, right? So next year, when you all come back to Wild Digital here in Indonesia, I bet you're going to see a whole lot of new faces, and who knows just what we're going to be talking about. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, Khailee.
Right, this
Thanks.
has been real fun.
Real chat. Thank you.